Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media.
Today on Spotlight, a new course teaching students to solve problems in women's health. Plus, from unique sculptures to Native American art, we'll take you inside the new exhibits at the Art Museum. And then how the World's Fair in St. Louis showcased wireless communication for the very first time. But first, a columnist from the Post-Dispatch exposes laws using criminals in jail as a fundraising tool. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
If ever there was the need for a real get-out-of-jail-free card, it's in rural America, where crime does pay if you're the government.
Wait a minute. People get charged for their time in jail like they're staying at a Holiday Inn?
That is the typical reaction people have when journalist Tony Messenger explains pay to stay, a phenomenon in mostly small towns by which mostly small-time criminals are handed big bills for their time in court, their days in jail, and even their months on probation.
The real bad part is they get put back in jail if they can't afford to pay, and that's debtor's prison.
Messenger, who is the Metro columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, has been documenting this practice for years, winning a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage. In his book, Profit and Punishment, Messenger explains how America criminalizes poverty and why it doesn't add up.
The system, when it penalizes people for their poverty, when it punishes their poverty, it actually in many ways makes the system less safe. It's not a math story, it's a human story.
The consequences are terrible. You open actually with the story of Brooke Bergen, which I guess is sort of what brought you partially to the story as well. And it's kind of like the butterfly effect. This woman shoplifts, an $8 tube of mascara.
$8 tube of mascara from Walmart.
And the story just gets worse and worse after that.
And she ended up spending a year in the county jail, which is bad enough. I think most people think that seems a little harsh for shoplifting, but some folks might think that's okay. But she did her time. She got out of jail, and they gave her a bill for $15,000. And when I saw that, I was just dumbfounded.
But aren't they, in a sense, then growing more criminals? I would imagine a lot of these people then become so desperate that they turn back to some sort of crime just to survive.
That's exactly what it is. It's it's actually really bad for public safety, and it's one of the reasons why folks on both the left and the right are starting to recognize that we have to stop using our criminal justice system as sort of a backdoor tax collector.
One of the reasons maybe that a lot of people in St. Louis, for instance, haven't heard about this is that it's primarily a rural phenomenon, yes?
As it relates to the board bills in the state of Missouri, the people that are charged for their time in jail and then put back in jail because they couldn't afford to pay those bills, that's a rural situation. That's something that even in the legal community, when I started writing about this, people in St. Louis didn't know about it. Because in St. Louis, in Kansas City, in Columbia even, and to some degree in Springfield, the local cities don't charge for time in jail. The law says they can, but historically, it hasn't been their practice to do so because they have a tax base that pays for their jail. They know taxpayers are already paying for it. We can disagree on what the reasonable punishment for those crimes is, but we can agree that nobody who's rich or poor should be punished differently because they're rich or poor for that same crime.
Well, I guess anything that brings the left and the right together is, if nothing else, miraculous.
It is. It absolutely is.
And perhaps it will bring an end to the system, or at least certainly make some significant changes. I imagine your book has probably enlightened a lot of people too. Profit and Punishment is the name of the book. Tony Messenger, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
To find out why Messenger says this is an easy fix, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
They are the best-selling authors and all of your favorite genres. For in-depth, one-on-one interviews, go to hecmedia.org.
Washington University and St. Louis students are having a real eye-opening experience.
One of the things that stuck with me was all of the different things that can go wrong in pregnancy, but the fact that maternal mortality is just increasing, especially in the US, I just think that's such a shocking fact that people are not quite thinking about or not realizing how incredible that is, especially in this country where we're supposed to have the resources and the technology.
They completed a recently launched innovative course at the McKelvey School of Engineering.
The name of the course is Women's Health Engineering.
The class is about 85% women. I know all the men in the class, and all of us have enjoyed it. The appeal for me is that it's a very understudied topic. There's a lot of funding available, and there's a lot of research to be done, and I think too often in engineering, we feel like the field has all been explored and the only things left are things that are super complicated and above our heads. But when you find an area that hasn't been explored nearly as much as it should have been, there's just too many opportunities.
There is growing research and technology in this area of engineering, giving rise to what's called FemTech.
So FemTech is the sort of generic name that's been given for a lot of startup companies in the space of women's health, really focused on technology. So anytime you're talking about engineers in this space, as opposed to just general medical research, we're focused really on engineering. So we're focused on bringing engineering tools and techniques. So that's a relatively new type of ultrasound. So historically, ultrasound machines were on big carts, and so they would roll it into a room. But now it's just a transducer and an iPad or another tablet. You can even get the transducer to talk to your phone. There are places in rural America where there isn't maternal care anymore, where hospitals have been closing their obstetrics units. So the ability to miniaturize engineering technology like an ultrasound machine and bring it out into the field.
Michelle Oyen is an associate professor in biomedical engineering and the director for the Center of Women's Health Engineering.
We've been in existence for about a year and a half. The center has 4 pillars of what we're trying to do. We have a focus on research, so developing relationships between people in engineering and people at the medical school with a goal towards advancing women's health. We have a teaching component for which this class that we've started this year is part of that, so a new course on women's health and engineering. And then we also have an element of entrepreneurship, working with founders in the FemTech industry.
She explains women's health has always been underfunded.
Well, anything to do with women's health has been historically underfunded and understudied compared with conditions in men's health. And that just comes from the history of research didn't used to be done as much by women, and women tend to be more interested in problems in women's health. So the great thing that's happening right now is that there's an injection of financing into research. There's a big women's health initiative that's being led by the White House right now. There's a lot of development work.
Biomedical engineering student Tisa Mandel explains how the course and the needs in women's health are more than just about reproductive health.
Mental health and like cardiac health and also like bone health, and it affects like all organs and body systems.
Example being cardiovascular disease. If your mother has preeclampsia while she's pregnant with you, whether you're male or female, you can have cardiovascular disease later in life as a direct result of that. So these effects are multi-generational. And so even though we talk about women's health, it's really just human health.
Oyen says there are many opportunities for jobs and innovation in FemTech.
Solutions that will have true positive impact on the world.
Prior to this, I was interested only in orthopedic surgery, and now I am starting to get a little bit more interested in obstetrician, gynecology, and also like oncology, because we talk a lot about cancer.
So it's a set of diseases that get lumped all together because they're...
For more St. Louis stories, subscribe to the HEC YouTube channel. Connect STL from HEC Media.
We're at the St. Louis Art Museum in the exhibition Native American Art of the 20th Century, the William P. Healy Collection. This exhibition is the first look at a recent promised gift and outright gift of 20th century Native American art to the St. Louis Art Museum by the Wyoming-based collector William P. Healy. This exhibition features 75 works from the gift, In total, the gift is 100 works. And in the exhibition, we're looking at work by 53 artists from 25 indigenous nations, mostly from the Western United States, largely concentrated in Oklahoma and New Mexico. The exhibition is really an overview of Native American art made in fine art studios in the 20th century. So the earliest works date to the early 1920s, and the most recent work is from 2018, though the core of the exhibition is focused on the 1920s to the 1970s or so. So this exhibition includes 2 galleries. We're in the gallery for the earlier work in the show, so the first works of studio art made by Native artists, really focused in the first half of the 20th century when Native artists started making work for fine art collectors and institutions. Dance subjects, like the painting behind me, were a really important theme. Other important themes included hunting and scenes of daily life, so images that mainstream audiences would almost instantly recognize as Native American subjects made by Native American artists. The second gallery in the exhibition includes more recent work, so what started in the 20s in New Mexico and Oklahoma by self-taught artists led to training programs in each state in the 1930s, and then a robust network of exhibitions and fairs through the 40s and 50s. By the 1960s, the second or maybe third generation of Native studio artists was calling for change, and so we see a really radical opening up of styles and subjects in the 1960s, and that's the focus of the second gallery. The St. Louis Art Museum has always presented recent work by Native American artists. It's been part of the museum's DNA since we've been here. This particular focus, though, what's often known as flat style painting from Oklahoma and New Mexico, has not been a major feature of our exhibition schedule. And so this exhibition and presentations of this work in galleries to follow will help the museum to tell a continuous story of Native American art from the years before contact and colonialism to the present day. I encourage you to come see this free exhibition for yourself. It's on view through July 14th. You can learn more by visiting our website at slam.org.
Hi, my name is Tamara Johnson. I'm a sculptor, and I'm here at the St. Louis Art Museum with my new installation, Currents 1, 2, 3, with a series of new works that I've been working on for the past year. When you come to the St. Louis Art Museum, you'll find very familiar looking objects, but all of the sculptures are actually translated into other materials like pigmented concrete, silicone rubber, plaster, copper. So there's a lot of interesting materials and objects on display. Many of the works in this exhibition I think about kind of as an expanded still life. So I've created a platform for a lot of these objects to be positioned on, and I think that they work together to kind of talk about systems of value and some of the larger industrial processes and systems that exist in maybe the industrial food systems or the extraction of concrete per se. But I think they have a levity to them as well, so they become very playful and recognizable. One of the pieces that you will find when you enter the room is a replication of a barf bag that you find in airplanes with "Feel Better" drawn in graphite. And the phrase "Feel Better" is kind of the way that I was thinking about all of the works in the show. It's kind of like an unofficial title for the show that all the works kind of are nestled underneath. I think a lot about the viewer, so I hope that the viewer can have many entry points into the work. They might just be very excited or intrigued by the materiality, which is wonderful. I hope that the installation encourages people to stay in the space and look at the pieces and try to find a lot of the little hidden details. And if they stay with it longer, they might understand maybe some other concepts or meanings. So one of the pieces that is probably my favorite piece in the exhibition are the tickets. They are made of copper sheeting, silk screened, and hand-stamped starting with my birthday and continuing on every day. They're about 160 feet long. And when I made this piece, I was thinking a lot about, the ways in which we kind of have value or create a type of currency in our lives, in our personal lives, and in a larger economy. And it makes you think of having a lot of tickets at the arcade as a kid, and that kind of power and energy that happens when you start amassing tickets and creating a way of your own to be rewarded with something. I also have a video in Gallery 301 that is a collaboration with my husband and artist Trey Burns that also works with a lot of the concepts and imagery and symbols that are in the installation in this gallery. I hope you come out to the St. Louis Art Museum to experience Currents 1, 2, 3 and see all the detailed sculptures that I've been working on for the past year. The exhibition goes through September 22nd, 2024.
Learn more about both of these exhibits at slam.org.
HEC Media, supporting and promoting the arts. Check out our features and shows on theater, dance, music, the visual arts, and more. Find this and all our award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, president of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. The 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis showcased wireless telegraphy through an impressive 300-foot towering display, offering fairgoers a first-hand experience of communication without wires. Public historian Adam Clappy sheds light on how this exhibition propelled the advancement of wireless communication.
Today, the idea that we can communicate with other people around the world wirelessly seems like a normal, everyday thing. After all, many of us carry devices in our pockets through which we can send messages, hear people's voices, and even chat with friends and family using video. Wireless communication is a part of our everyday life. But there was a time not so long ago when this technology seemed impossible, and it's fair to say that many people's first brush with wireless communication happened right here in St. Louis. In 1904, of course, St. Louis hosted the World's Fair, a celebration which brought 19 million people from all over the globe to Forest Park. One of the most jaw-dropping displays at the fair was a 300-foot tall tower erected by a company called the American DeForest Wireless Telegraph Company. The founder of the company, Lee DeForest, had not invented wireless telegraphy. The idea of communicating wirelessly had been in the works for decades. In the 1890s, Guglielmo Marconi had invented transmitters and receivers that made the idea commercially viable. But up until 1904, most people had never communicated without wires themselves. The technology was limited to mostly military use, transatlantic shipping, and the odd newsroom. DeForest sought to change this at the 1904 World's Fair. Using his 300-foot tall tower, as well as several shorter transmitters around the fairgrounds, DeForest encouraged people to try out wireless telegraphy for themselves. He got fairgoers to send messages across the fairgrounds to small wireless stations and even small carriages outfitted with wireless receivers. Even the most skeptical of fairgoers would have come away amazed as the information they sent from one part of the fair seemed to be magically waiting for them at another, even though no wires connected those locations. DeForest also pushed the limits of how far messages could be sent, using his long-range transmitters to reach far beyond the fairground to places as far away as Chicago. What's more, many visitors who had been indifferent to trying out this new technology were enticed to the DeForest Wireless Tower because it was one of the tallest structures on the fairgrounds. As such, the tower offered some of the best views of the fair, so thousands of people rode the elevator to the top just to catch a view. While they were there, they learned about wireless telegraphy, and more than a few were tempted to try it for themselves. By the end of the fair, millions of people had been exposed to the wonders of wireless telegraphy, and soon this form of communication was being used all over the world. But Lee DeForest himself didn't see much success from this. His company ceased operation in 1912.
Next week on History Spotlight, one of St. Louis's renowned blues artists, possibly holding the record for the longest blues career in history.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.
When cicadas start to show up,
later on Spotlight, a cicada song that's sure to bring a smile to your face.
Eat them like they're popcorn.
Who's your boy? I love you.
In the theater at the Missouri History Museum.
Who's your boy?
history repeated itself.
When you're not at Grandin Gravois, where do you go?
It's called Some of My Best Friends Are, just as it was when it was first produced in St. Louis 33 years ago. And just as it was then, this reunion performance was standing room only.
I'll be there.
It was supposed to run for 2, maybe 3 weeks. And then it ran for 3 months.
At the time, it was billed as St. Louis's first gay and lesbian revue for people of all preferences, staged counterintuitively in the basement of a South St. Louis church. Playwright Joan Lipkin, founder of that uppity theater company, conceived the piece, wrote and directed the scenes, and produced it, with music and lyrics by Tom Clear.
We started with cabaret tables, and we got so popular we took them away and made seating, and I would see Joan every night fitting this chair in over here, and could you scoot over a little bit?
I would love to do it.
The 2022 reunion starred most of the original cast, performing a selection of the original material, including the song No Billing, which tells the true story of Joan Lipkin's struggle to find actors willing to appear in the show, advertisers other than gay-friendly businesses willing to appear in the program, and mainstream media willing to cover it.
My mother would probably give up the ghost if she heard on the tube or read in the Post.
The then entertainment editor of the Post-Dispatch said to me, "This is not appropriate for a family newspaper." And I said to him, "You haven't seen it. You haven't seen it, you haven't read it. So how can you make a decision like that?" And it infuriated me.
Once it was clear the show was a phenomenon, the paper changed its position.
Wow! 2 mommies!
The play, originally a sign of the times, is now more of a time capsule, opened for one night only at the History Museum. The reunion was meant to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the play, but had to be postponed 3 years because of COVID. Rehearsals were mostly done on Zoom. When Some of My Best Friends Are opened in 1989, it predated everything from marriage equality to Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was, however, during the depths of the AIDS crisis and the 20th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion, credited with starting the LGBTIQA+ civil rights movement.
There was grief and illness and dying, and I thought, this can't be all of what our story is.
It's like nutrition for us as gay folks that some of us don't get from family or community elsewhere. The way that they wrote the show, it was community building.
That uppity theater company had a booth at the back of the theater to give activists a place to bring attention to their causes, among them a petition drive to overturn Missouri's sexual misconduct statute. It was eventually repealed, but only after the Supreme Court found such laws unconstitutional.
Women's relationships are different from men's. After we break up, we're still friends.
After 33 years, when you still remember a piece of art, that's evidence that that piece of art had a fundamental impact.
Rodney Wilson saw the play during its original run and went on to have a fundamental impact of his own. After finding himself the center of media attention when the then 29-year-old history teacher came out to his students, Wilson went on to found LGBTIQ+ History Month, now celebrated across the United States and in 14 other countries.
You know, we all nudge here a little, nudge there a little, and eventually all of those nudges produce a profound impact.
Among those in the audience for this production was a current student of Rodney Wilson's, interviewed the next day by Wilson to get his reaction.
In the best and worst ways, as much as things have changed, they've stayed the same. And I think that is one of the great points of that show, is that it stays relevant. But also, we wish it wouldn't stay relevant.
Gonna throw it up into congressional debate whenever I decide to accept a date.
There is no one way of measuring how much has changed for the LGBTQ+ community over the past 33 years. But consider this.
There's a judge in my bedroom.
In 1989, Joan Lipkin says she had to beg the city to send extra police patrols to the theater for protection against potential hate-motivated attacks.
There's a judge in my bedroom.
At this performance, the city sent a mayoral proclamation to the theater, designating October 20th, 2022 as Some of My Best Friends Are Day in the city of St. Louis.
If we don't find ways that we get together, that we sit together in spaces and learn about each other's experiences and also enjoy each other, where are we going? This little thing that I wrote 33 years ago actually might not be a museum piece, and it actually might be more relevant than ever.
HEC Media, recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
13 years is a real long time, it's a real long time to wait. But 13 years living underground for cicadas is just great. After 13 years they come up for their first look at the sky. They don't know that most of them are about to die. 'Cause the birds and dogs, possums and coons, they've been waiting too. When cicadas start to show up, they know just what to do. And the birds and dogs, possums and coons, eat them like they're popcorn. It's a periodic cornucopia, a cicada smorgasbord. It's a periodic cornucopia, a cicada smorgasbord. Now a few lucky cicadas escape the jaws of fate, start chirping and start singing, find themselves a mate. Pretty soon baby cicadas burrow down into the ground, and 13 years later they all come back around. And the birds and dogs, the possums and coons, they'll be waiting there, licking their chops, ready to pounce when they come up for air. Another 13 years a-waiting, gone in another blink. Must be true, 13 really is unlucky, don't you think? Must be true, 13 really is unlucky, don't you think?
Next week, a behind-the-scenes look at this year's Shakespeare in the Park performance. Plus, the life and career of icon and St. Louis blues legend Henry Townsend. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.